In this film, Cahit Sıtkı Tarancı is at your age. Do you want to be friends with him? Guys, this is Cahit Sıtkı Tarancı. I am one of the important representatives of Turkish poetry in the Republican period. Would you like to hear my life story from me? I was born in Diyarbakır in 1910. My father is Bekir Sıtkı Bey, and my mother is Arife Hanım. Our family was one of the Diyarbakır's famous and well-established families. My great-grandfathers were engaged in rice production and trade. In addition, there were many people in our family who had important positions in the state administration. My father, Bekir Sıtkı, was also engaged in rice production. When the surname law was enacted, he took the surname Tarancı, which means farmer. I grew up in a mansion that used to be a hospital. There was a large pool in the courtyard of the mansion. I used to enjoy swimming in this pool in the scorching heat of Diyarbakır during the day. After graduating from primary school in Diyarbakır, I continued my education in Istanbul. First, I went to St. Joseph High School. Here, I learned French and started reading French poets. I was 18 when I started Galatasaray High School. I knew the poems of many French poets by heart. Like many young people of that age, I was very keen on writing poetry. My school friend and poet Ziya Osman Sabah had a great influence on my enthusiasm for poetry. I really enjoyed reading what I wrote to him. My first poem was published in 1930 in Servet-i Fünun magazine. Later, on Muhid and Galatasaray magazines also published some of my poems. While I was studying at Galatasaray, I spent the weekends at my uncle's house, and in the summer holidays I was going to Diyarbakır to my family. In Diyarbakır, I was going to the movies, visiting with my friends, giving literature lessons in French to my brother. Sometimes I would go to the rice fields with my father and watch the villagers work. After graduating from high school, I entered the Mektebi Mülkiye, today's Faculty of Political Sciences. Then I completed my higher education by continuing the higher commercial school. My first poetry book, Silence in My Life, was published in 1933. I was so happy that the first thing I did was to send my book to my family. Meanwhile, my father lost money from the rice trade and sent me less money. Thereupon, I started looking for a job and entered Sümerbank as a civil servant. After working as a civil servant for about a year, I resigned. I made a living by publishing my stories. Then, I got a job at a newspaper. The owners of the newspaper I worked for liked me very much. I had learned their trust. Then they sent me to Paris. I started to work as a presenter in the Turkish service of Radio Paris. On the other hand, I continued my higher education. On the other hand, I was writing stories. I was sending these stories to newspapers in Turkey for publication. The days I spent in Paris were the best days of my life. I was going to the environments where the artists were and trying to get to know the European culture. But soon the Second World War broke out. Then I had to return to Turkey. Shortly after I returned, I was drafted into the army and wrote many of my poems while I was in the military. After completing my military service, I worked with my father for a while. Then I went to Ankara and started working as a translator at the Ministry of Labour. Meanwhile, a poetry competition was opened. I also participated in this competition with my poem Age 35 and won the first place. Thanks to this, I gained great fame. My poetry book titled Age 35 was published in 1946 and attracted great attention in the literacy circles of the period. In the following years, This book became one of the most published poetry books in Turkey. After marrying Cavidan Hanım in 1951, a happy and peaceful period began in my life. Under the influence of this situation, I tended to write new poems. I was trying to be meticulous and careful while writing my poems. I was tearing up the things I didn't like without thinking, because I always knew I could write better. It is said that I am the poet who uses Turkish the best, because I used a simple and understandable language. My poems have been read lovingly by many people. In my poems, I mostly dealt with topics such as loneliness, longing, and joy of life. For me, every emotion can be expressed through poetry. Dear children, I hope my life story has caught your attention. I have been someone who loves nature, people, and life. Friendship was the most important thing to me. I tried to support and encourage some of my friends who were facing difficulties. I have always approached people with warm, pure and clean feelings. I recommend it to you too, so you can make our world a place of love and brotherhood.